From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant joined as always by JB as the Toronto Argonauts drop their second game of the season. This one a 29-19 loss to the Calgary Stampeders here at BMO Field. Before we get into everything that we saw today, JB, why don't you tell the folks at home about Something in the Water Brewing and what it was like there today pregame?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was a great group of people. It was really fun to touch base and have some great conversations. Yeah, it was great vibes, nice sun, delicious beverages. Are really, in the end, far superior to the game.
Yes, unfortunately, Something in the Water Brewing is a great place to go pre-game. If you didn't get a chance to go down there today, and I didn't, JB, I got to send out my apologies because I said I'd be there. I was planning on being there, and then life kind of took a turn on me. I'm really glad that you were able to get down there and hang out and enjoy some beverages while I was doing a combination of things, including being stuck in traffic. But we'll have to get out there together at some point. Maybe it'll be this week as the Saskatchewan Rough Riders come to town on Friday night. All right, JB, let's get into this game. To me, there wasn't much difference between this game and last game. When you look at it, you had a loss, first of all, but it was an offense that couldn't put points up on the board and, in fact, surrendered a touchdown. And that ended up being a huge difference in this game. And so I don't know how many weeks this can go on for, but you can't have a situation where your offense is surrendering points. Last year, the Argos went through a very similar thing where Chad Kelly was suspended for the first 9 games of the season. Cameron Dukes and then eventually Nick Arbuckle were in at quarterback. They were winning some of those games because they were getting touchdowns from special teams, touchdowns from the defense, and the offense wasn't doing anything to sabotage their efforts. And in both the first week in Montreal and this game here today at BMO Field, the offense surrendered a touchdown and the defense special teams unit couldn't get a score of their own. You just can't win games without your starting quarterback, without your defensive leader too, and without maybe your best special teams player in Janarian Grant.
No, it's hard to get too worked up about it. I mean, there are definitely things that we can talk about that they need to improve upon. And it is a loss. You can't just kind of dismiss it. But, like you say, the reality is that this is a team that is missing 4 or 5 of its best players for most of the game, if not the whole game. And they, just were not able to get it done. The only way a team can win without their starting quarterback is if they get touchdowns from their special teams or touchdowns from their defense. You just have to have one of the other groups do it. And on return, they don't have their returners, so that eliminates special teams. And then on defense, for most of the game, they were missing McManus. So it puts them really up against the wall. I think it's disappointing to watch the game, but it's hard to get too upset.
Let's talk about Nick Arbuckle first. So he finished the game 31 of 42, 309 yards. That part sounds great. 31 of 42, awesome. 309 yards, awesome. 1 touchdown, that's okay. 2 interceptions, one of which goes for a pick 6. And I think some of those stats are a little misleading. That 46-yard touchdown pass to DeMonte Coxie, it wasn't a pass deep downfield. That's really what Nick Arbuckle was missing from his game today, is those passes downfield. There were a lot of checkdowns. I think it's very telling that Mayan Williams, the 240-pound running back, was not only the leading rusher for Toronto, but the leading receiver as well, with 9 catches on 9 targets for 65 yards. That is not a great recipe for success when your leading receiver is your pounder at running back.
No, I didn't think it was a very good day for Arbuckle. I thought there was a decent chance that they were going to replace him at halftime, just to try and get a spark. He wasn't able to get downfield. With a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of screens. He wasn't able to run at all or to make that a threat. There were some poor decisions in terms of throwing into double coverage. A couple of long field side throws I thought that were poor decisions. So it was not a good performance by Arbuckle, I don't think, by any metric.
Yeah, that his arm strength seems to have dropped off a little bit. He's never necessarily had a cannon, like certainly not like Chad Kelly or McLeod Bethel Thompson, but he had a strong arm. But that doesn't appear to be the case anymore. On the first throw that he made to Dave Unger III on that comeback route to the wide side of the field, there was a ton of space, and Unger caught it in a lot of space. He was able to catch the ball, make a move, get a first down easily. The second time he threw that ball, it was much closer, and we said on the broadcast, Mike Hogan and I were talking about it on the broadcast, that is too dangerous a throw. You can't, if you're Nick Arbuckle with your current arm strength, you cannot take a shot to the wide side of the field on a hook route again. You've got away with it twice. The third time isn't going to be there, and sure enough, it came to fruition. That third pass to Ungerer went for a pick six.
Yeah, it's so funny in my notes. I'm like, whoa, do not throw that ball again.
Yeah, it's too far. It's a 55-yard throw that you just can't make on a rope.
You can't, no. And there were a couple of times, even some of the deep balls, like, we're not throwing with enough pace to let the receiver catch it, and Coach got smoked on one play, because the ball just took too long to get there, and the safety comes over. It was. I can't see any way that he starts next week. If Kelly's not a go, I cannot see them starting Arbuckle against. Even though, like, in a vacuum, his statistics look okay. He was not able to drive the team today. I don't think you can have him as the quarterback.
No, and I'm with you on that. I just don't think. I know that the problem is you don't have experience in the quarterback room. Like, there's not a guy that you can turn to where you're like, whoa, we got this guy. He's just, he's waiting to go. Jared Dagey, who's, played in some meaningful games, but not a ton of them. Tucker Horn, who's never played in a CFL regular season game. I don't know how comfortable on a short week Coach Dinwiddie is going to be turning to one of those two guys. So I don't actually think it's going to happen. Now, would I do it? Yes, I think I probably would. And I like Nick Arbuckle a lot, and I have not forgotten that he was the guy that contributed to that Grey Cup win, was the Grey Cup MVP. He muscled them through that win in Montreal where things could have turned sideways. I'm not forgetting that. But what we've seen over the last two games isn't enough. And with 4 points in the first half today, where they didn't score a touchdown until late, when it was almost out of reach. I just don't think we've seen enough positive signs. And you could turn last week and say, yeah, well, he didn't get a lot of pass protection last week. There was no running game to complement it. That wasn't the case today. They were running the ball very effectively. And there were receivers open downfield, not deep downfield, mind you, and we can talk about that a bit later and the problems that some of the Argos receivers had in getting separation and man coverage especially. But yeah, this was not, it's the second game in a row. It's not a great Nick Arbuckle performance. He seems to have lost a little bit of that magic, and maybe this is the time that you hand the ball over to Tucker Horn or Jared Dagey.
Look, we went through it with Dukes and Arbuckle. Dukes didn't have very much experience. I think you have to try something to kind of spark the offense, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think you have to try.
Let's talk about the one positive spot, maybe. Well, maybe there's a couple, because I think there were some positives on defense too. But let's talk about the glaring positive in a day that didn't really have that many. Everyone was talking all week about, I certainly heard it on social media, I saw it in my DMs as well. Everybody was on the Argos about Kadeem Carey signing in Saskatchewan after Mayan Williams and Deontay McMahon had such a rough game last week running the football. It was great to see everything that John Murphy talked about with us a couple weeks ago really show itself today. Mayan Williams was the best player on the Toronto Argonauts today. 9 carries, 62 yards on the ground, was the leading receiver, 9 catches on 9 targets for 65 yards. There's nothing that Kadeem Carey could have done in this game that would have been better than what Mayan Williams produced.
Yeah, he was great. He was, he ran hard, he ran physical. He obviously doesn't have elite speed, but pretty good. Fast enough for a guy his size. I thought he looked really good. I thought they got away from the run game too early, which sometimes they do. The game was very close for most of the game. I thought they abandoned the run game way too early in the first half.
Yeah, if you look at Calgary on the other side, Calgary had no success running the football. Toronto's run defense was amazing, but still Mills ended up with 13 carries. And you say, well, if Mills had 13 carries and he was barely moving at 28 yards total, how can we not find a way to get Williams more carries, especially since McMahon went down early with an injury, what looked like a lower body injury. McMahon only had 2 carries for 2 yards. It was Williams' show for most of the day. I think you have to find a way to get him a little bit more action, especially now. Maybe you can. I think the counter to that, and I'm making the counter to that, kind of, from an offensive coordinator standpoint. The counter to that is that's what those catches are. Like the Mine Williams receptions are basically runs. A lot of them are check downs and passes out into the flats where you essentially have found another way to generate rushing yards. JB, let's talk about the receivers. We went through Mine Williams catches. Other than him, Coxie had another good game. 6 catches on 8 targets, 98 yards, and a touchdown. There was also a pass interference penalty that I didn't initially see, but on replay was really clear. Coxie basically got turned upside down while in the air by a Stampeders defender, and so you can add that 38-some yards to his totals if you wanted to. I thought Coxie played really well. I think he wasn't given a lot of great opportunities. A lot of those were like jump balls, one-on-one, like let's just see if Coxie can make a play. But how about that touchdown? We've seen how hard it is to tackle DeMonte Coxie once he gets ahead of steam. He's a big physical receiver. I think we forget that sometimes. And on that touchdown pass, he was running a simple dig route. He caught the ball a few feet before a linebacker was about to clock him, and he managed to spin out of that hit and then run the remaining 30 of that 46 yards into the end zone. Like, what a sensational play. For the second week in a row, I thought DeMonte Coxie looked brilliant.
Yeah, he was terrific. He and had a tough break on that other catch that he got knocked physically hard that he lost it. But he was definitely a deep threat. I thought they should have attacked the middle of the field more. There seemed to be a lot of wide outs, and then there were a couple along the rail passes, but there wasn't a lot of attacking in the middle of the field. I would have liked to have seen more of that. I thought, I mean, if you look at the stats, the guys did not drop balls. The target and catches are all very close. It's just a question of what kind of passes they're catching and what can they do with them when they catch them.
It's interesting that you say that, because that was the theme last week, too. The targets last week and this week are going to the outside. DeMonte Coxie, Dave Ungerer, those are the guys that Nick Arbuckle's looking at. Last week, there were no targets for Kevin Mittal. This week, Brissett didn't have a catch playing in the slot, and Herzl only had 2 catches. Mittal did get some action. He had 6 catches. There was one that counts as a reception, but is really just sort of a jet sweep that's pitched forward. They did make an effort to get Mittal involved, but we go past DeMonte Coxie's numbers. Kevin Mittal is next, 6 catches, 30 yards. That's not much for production, a long of 7. Ungerer had 5 for 55, most of those on comebacks on the outside, those dangerous plays. Tavares, 3 catches for 32. Herzl, 2 catches for 29. There just wasn't a lot of receiver activity beyond DeMonte Coxie and Mine Williams, which again I'm almost putting into the running category there. What does this offense need to do? Is there anything I could convince you of that would lead you to believe that Nick Arbuckle should be out there for one more game, or is this absolutely it for you? You think, it's time to move on for the Argos?
Well, I'm not at practice, so I mean, all I can assume based on today is that they don't feel they have somebody who is pressing for the starting role. I think Dinwiddie has shown in the past that he's not afraid to make a change at half. So I think that probably spoke more to the 2 backup quarterbacks than it did to his confidence in Arbuckle. So maybe they're just not ready. I think offensively, obviously having hopefully McMahon is able to go, so you can get a little like thunder and lightning action going. I think similar with AJ Ouellette, I really like when they have misdirection offensively. When it's not just lining up and trying to have the guy in the hole, but when they have, whether you're running scissors or you're running some misdirection or you run the jet and then you have the running play. So I think the more misdirection they can mix into their running game, I think that that can really work. And the screen game seemed to be okay. But if you can't throw deep posts, or deep ins, I just don't know how you compete against another team. It's really hard. And without having a punt returner or a kick returner who is elite, the starting position was brutal all day for the Argonauts. It was an uphill fight all day. They have to have that kick returner to try and compensate for the quarterback. It's kind of a perfect storm of things kind of damning them. I don't know if there's much you can do other than just wait patiently for Chad Kelly to return.
And the hope is every week. The hope is that maybe this is the week and Chad Kelly will be able to go, and so that will again be the hope. But I think on a short week, I'm not sure. It helps to have another game at home. It's Friday night at BMO Field against Saskatchewan, and that is probably what can. That's probably the only thing that results in there being a change at QB. Honestly, is Chad Kelly being good to go. So we'll have to see. But it's it's tough going. I think there are throws that Chad Kelly certainly can make that nobody else in this quarterback room can. Those outstronger, including that one that got picked off. It's not that ball can't ever be thrown, but it has to be thrown by a quarterback who's got a rocket of an arm. And even Chad Kelly on that last one, I don't know if he's able to squeeze that in there. It's just such a long pass. If you're not threatening downfield, then those are really difficult to make. And the difference there, and because I know you might be sitting at home saying, well, hang on, Chad Kelly throws that ball all the time. He does, because there's a threat downfield, because he could easily just go to the corner route to that same side too. And so DBs can't pinch. They can't play up. But what we're seeing now with Arbuckle is the same thing we saw last year with Cameron Dukes, where DBs aren't afraid of the deep pass. They're not, defensive coordinators aren't stacking four guys deep. They're not playing way off this umbrella coverage. They're pressing. They're up close, and they're anticipating that ball coming out quickly. They're anticipating short routes, and that causes problems. It causes turnovers. It causes incompletions. And Chad Kelly doesn't get that same treatment from defenses or defensive coordinators because he's a legitimate threat downfield.
Yeah, I mean, the wide receiver group is not really built for Arbuckle. Like, I think ideally if you're, not an elite quarterback, you want to have a receiver who's able to get open, one-on-one in terms of shiftiness that you can kind of look to all the time, and that's not really who they have. So it does put more pressure on Arbuckle because guys were just not particularly open, and he threw the double coverage a lot.
Yeah, but there wasn't. Yeah, that I know. It was frustrating to watch. He sacked a couple times today. I think there were 2 sacks on Arbuckle. But I felt like, we're talking about the offensive line for a second. I felt like the offensive line played a lot better today. I know Flo Remalade got free, but he's going to do that. He's going to do that against any team, against any tackle. I thought in general the offensive line was better. They weren't great today. They weren't great in pass protection, but they were fine, which is a step better than what we saw last week. And they were very good at run blocking, something they were terrible at last week. So a definite improvement from the offensive line, but there's also maybe a tier difference between Montreal and the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a mixture of both. I thought, from the offensive line did look better. I thought the defense looked really good in the first half. Losing McManus is a huge loss. I mean, that changed everything. He was all over the field in that first quarter. Defensive line was getting some decent pressure, certainly in the first half. They blew contain a couple of times, which was a killer against VA. And that's just the kind of stuff where they just have no margin for error. That's what makes it so hard to win when you don't have your starters is you can't make a single mistake, which is a really hard way to play football. Because the defense did play well today, but there were a couple of busts, and the offense wasn't really able to flip the field. So like you're dealing with it. You're dealing where Calgary has pretty decent field position all the time, and the defense got worn down a little bit and weren't able to hold up. But I thought on the whole that first half was a really nice showing for the defense.
Yeah, I would even give them through the third quarter too. Like they just ran out of gas at the end, and that last drive they had brought it so many times. They continued to bail out the offense, and I think it just got to be so discouraging. You're at that stage of the game and you're out there again. Time of possession was surprisingly close. I really felt like Calgary had the ball all day long. That's not the case, but certainly the defense looked worn at the end of that game, because you've got, once you lose McManus, all those linebackers are playing massive special team snaps to begin with, and so those guys are gassed, and they were rotating through. You had Cassara in there, and Dark Angelo played a lot. Obviously, Judge was out there most of the time. I thought they played great. I thought it was a nice game from Cameron Judge. I thought he took over as the leader of that defense, ended up as the leader in tackles. He was all over the field. And
he flashed a lot, especially on run. Like he was, he played really well. Yeah,
and Dark Angelo I thought played well too. Kassar handled himself pretty well, but he was in a pretty tough spot too with the way that
was not a day showered in glory for the defensive backs.
No, but I thought their positioning was pretty good.
Yeah,
so
that's what was so frustrating. Because I can only imagine, the coaches, because, on a couple of plays they were absolutely right there in phase, played it perfectly, and just could not compete for the ball.
Yeah, it happened with Kenneth George. It happened with Benji Franklin, Tavares McFadden on one, Mark Milton on another. The guys were in a perfect spot, absolutely perfect spot. Got their head around even.
It wasn't bust, like they're right there. I mean, which is of course frustrating, and probably the only thing they would want to work on is I'm sure stopping the run was a focus, and you could see the defensive backs were flying to the ball on run, and Calgary play action them a couple of times.
And there was that flea flicker
that trigger. So they just need to be aware, and that's an aspect of not having Winton, right? Where everybody is coming in as a team tackling to stop the run, and you just have to be careful about pulling that trigger too fast, because you could see that Calgary sat on it a couple of times and knew that they were going to have those defensive backs coming forward on the pass.
What did you think of that flea flicker call from Calgary?
Yeah, I mean,
perfect.
I think absolutely. I mean, they see these guys flying into the box and to stop the run, and I thought that was a really, they sat on it, and it was a good call.
Now, JB, you've called us out on this before. I know some listeners have too. We rarely forget to check in with our one things to see if they contributed to an Argos win or loss.
One thing that we don't remember.
One thing that we don't remember to do. We both did not hit our one things today, which maybe contributed to the Argos loss. Mine was close. I wanted at least one 20-yard run. Mine Williams had a 19-yard run, but that doesn't check the box, so that one thing didn't come through. And you wanted a defensive touchdown, and boy, would that have come in handy today. So neither one thing coming through.
Yeah, I mean, they had to have it, right? Because now they're down to no special teams and no starting quarterback. So, you're just not going to win football games like that. Even if they don't win next week without Kelly, it's okay. Luckily, the East is a bit of a tire fire at the moment.
They shouldn't be.
So it's okay. Don't rush Kelly back. It's okay to lose another game and kind of get yourself together. There are still positives, but I mean, really today was injuries. You can't lose McManus, and you can't not have your best punt returner and your best kick returner when you don't have your best starting quarterback and expect to win a game. It just really is not possible.
Oh, and then Calgary lost Reggie Bagleton very early, arguably their best player. and that looked like a really nasty injury. I'm hoping that he's okay, and it just looked way worse than it was, but I'm not very optimistic about that. The way that he wasn't able to put any weight on it at all as his right leg as he was helped off the field. But they suffered their share of injuries. They had an injury to their long snapper who was able to get back into the game, but that's an area you talk about missing Janarian Grant. With playing with the long snapper who can't actually cover downfield, because that was Calgary's situation. They had him out for one play. The snap went over the holder's head for the missed convert. That showed right there, like, they needed him in. And so they kept him into long snap, knowing that he couldn't even continue on coverage. How much did they miss Janarian Grant there with only 11 guys down on the coverage team, including a punter? Man, that would have been huge.
And I know I'm not bagging on anybody because they're not supposed to be a punt returner, but we averaged 4 yards punt return. You get 5.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it was, they just were never able to flip the field, especially in the first half. They just weren't able to set the defense up where at least Calgary had to go a longer distance. It's really, really tough to not have a kick return game when you don't have a strong quarterback game.
Let's see if we can, because I know a lot of Argos fans listening to this are like, oh goodness, this was a tough game to watch for the second week in a row. Let's look at some bright spots here, and that is, let's not forget about the fact that the Argos for today, for a lot of last week as well, they're missing so many important players. We talked about Chad Kelly already. We talked a lot about the quarterback play. And I think that, has to be something like it is a major thing. You take out anybody starting quarterback and what do they look like? Well, look at Ottawa, even without Dustin Crum. And he's not in the same league as Chad Kelly, and yet that team couldn't do anything offensively. That's generally what happens. Winnipeg was a bit of an exception, but Winnipeg is often a bit of an exception. Everybody else struggles, and that's what you've seen. But let's add to that, Wyndham McManus has not been 100%. He was banged up going into last week, had to come out for a little bit last week, tried to give it a go today, had to come out of this game, was back in street clothes in the second half. Those are massive losses, and then you add to it what you get from Janarian Grant, and that the elite level of his return play that just isn't there. That is 3 phases. That is arguably the best player in each of your 3 phases. Your star quarterback, your star middle linebacker, and your star punt returner. You've got defensive player of the year consideration guy, an MVP consideration guy, and your special teams player of the year consideration guy, and they're all off the field for the Argonauts. That is a huge series of hurdles to overcome. And so maybe it's not surprising that the Argos are sitting here now 0-2, especially having lost one of those games in Montreal, and Calgary looking like a much better football team than I think people thought they were going to be going to this season.
Yeah, Williams looks nice at running back, but tall, still flashes. I think he's still going to be really good. The team defense was pretty solid. They were much better against the run today. They were able to get some pressure on the quarterback. They had some really great sacks of VA. There were definitely a lot of positives to take away. It just was not a very exciting game to watch. But I think the underlying statistics of the game are positive, and then when you roll in some all-stars into that, then you're gonna start cooking with gas.
You know who's starting to look like a player is Chatfield. Andrew Chatfield playing the defensive end spot. He's a load too. They can move him around a lot. I think that's why they're comfortable with only 3 defensive tackles dressing, that they feel comfortable putting Parrish inside sometimes. They feel comfortable putting Chatfield inside. They can move those guys around. I think Lanier played really well again today. This is the second week in a row where Lanier looked like the old Anthony Lanier. I think they were getting really good play from DeMarcus Christmas, although I know he went down with an injury. And they got some really good play from Williams too. So their defensive line, I actually thought, looked pretty good today. They were awesome in run stopping, holding holding Mills, who last week, I remember Mills, I know he had a touchdown today, but it was a 1-yard touchdown plunge where I'm not even 100% that he got in. But that was it for Mills. He had an 11-yard run on a play where Toronto was kind of rolling awkwardly into coverage, and he happened to run right into the gap where somebody vacated at that moment. Everything else was like a 2-yard gain, a 2-yard gain, a 2-yard gain. Mills had nothing, and that's while still worrying about a running quarterback in Vernon Adams. I think, like as you said, the defense, they blew contain that, a couple times, I guess, that one big play that really hurt them. But yeah, there's some real positive signs from that defensive line, guys, that we hadn't really maybe expected to look as good as they do at this stage of the season.
No, if you're a car and you're in a race and you lose one tire, you're probably not going to win the race, but you're still going, and then you lose a second tire, well, you're probably not going to be very competitive. And then you lose a third tire, now you're a one-tire car. It's very hard to start screaming at the car to win the race.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if that analogy hits home or not, but I'll take it. Before we sign off here...
That's my capturing of what I watched today. It was a one-tire car driving around in circles.
Before we sign off here, let's talk a little bit about what an awesome atmosphere it was down here. You had almost 18,000 people. The west side of the stands was completely full. The end zone was completely full. And then a pretty good number of fans in the lower bowl on the other side. It was banner unfurling day. It was Grey Cup replica ring day. It was a beautiful sunny day as well on top of that. And so I think everything was going so well. You just wish, with such a great crowd on hand, wouldn't it have been nice for Toronto to be able to put on a show for them today? And instead, 4 points in the first half and just not a lot to cheer about until late in the fourth quarter when DeMonte Coxey broke through with that huge touchdown.
Yeah, it was an awesome vibe. It was the Grey Cup ceremony was fantastic, and it was a beautiful day, and no cannon, which was I liked because I hate that cannon. It scares me every time. But it was a really fun day. I love the 4:00 start. Friday is the Pride game, which is also a terrific game. Hopefully they get a nice crowd for that. I think on the whole it was a very positive day. If you were an Argo fan, I think you would have had a pretty good time today, but you just have to be patient.
Yeah, and at the very least, you probably came away with a replica Grey Cup ring. You got to be here for the banner unfurling.
Which I did. I actually got in line to get one, and I ran out like 3 people in front of me. So.
That serves you right.
What? No, and I see people wearing that blue hat that I wanted from last year.
I know, you're just not meant to get giveaways, JB.
Yeah.
Well, just before we wrap up, the Argos have a slightly short week this week, as do the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who will be in town. They're currently playing against the Hamilton Tiger Cats just down the QEW. They are coming to BMO Field on Friday night, 7:30 kickoff. And this is going to be a huge game, I think, for the Argos. I know you still say you can afford, it's not time to panic yet. You can afford to drop one more. I think they need to get into that win column. And Saskatchewan playing back-to-back weeks on the road, having to come halfway across the country. I just feel like this is a game you have to win. And I know Saskatchewan's a good team. I know they are going to bring everything they got. Coach Mace, you can be sure, is going to bring a great game plan to BMO Field. This is a game that you have to. I think you have to do everything you can to try and win and end up 1-2 instead of falling to 0-3. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Again, the final score here from BMO Field, the Calgary Stampeders 29, the Toronto Argonauts 19. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.